Hello, family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name's Betty, and today I'm joined by Tania. And Tania is a divine spiritual being living a temporary human experience. She's had a transformative faith journey. She lives in Dubai, and I'm really grateful for your willingness to come on and serve our community. She's also a podcast host, and we'll have links in the liner notes of this episode so that you can go check that out. And I'm excited for you to share your journey with us. So I'm going to toss it right over to you.
Thank you so much, Betty, for inviting me to your show. Honestly, I'm like a huge fan of yours. I think you're probably like the first person that I interviewed on the show. And it was like, Betty said yes to me. Your story is phenomenal. I love it. And I'm so excited to be speaking here to your audience. I don't think I have like this big transformative story. But what happened with me was I am an Indian. So I'm born and raised in Dubai, which is in the Middle East. So we have got Muslims around me. My friends are Muslims. My ex-boyfriends are Muslims. So everyone's a Muslim. And I was raised in a strict Catholic upbringing where we don't really question things. It's wrong to question things. If I question something, or if I say I don't want to pray, or I don't trust in something, whatever is written in the Bible, then our community, our family, they would all just look at us weird. It's like, why are you asking questions? You're not supposed to ask questions. And what happened was, when in 2018, 19, I went through a divorce. And I've always been someone who my life revolved around praying. And if something good happens, I would go to the grotto and light candles in front of Mother Mary. If I have something bad happening too, that's the first place that I would go to. But so I always felt like I've always been a good girl. I've done everything correctly. So when the divorce happened, I completely couldn't understand why this happened. Why would this happen to me? Why did God do this? And that it just shocked me because I never expected this to happen. And from then on, I decided that that's it. I'm not going to talk to this God anymore. I don't want to speak to God. I don't trust in God anymore. I don't trust in Jesus. Like, why would something like this happen to someone like me when I never did anything wrong? And at that point of time, even there was something that my mom said too, which is, even my mom was in shock. And she was also like, you must have done something wrong for you to, for God to punish you this way. And that just made me feel so lonely and so angry. And I moved out of my home with my daughter. So I had my baby. She was just a newborn. And I was so mad at everyone, my family and religion. And I was so alone. And at that point of time, I was going through life, which was so difficult. And I couldn't understand why I felt like I lost a part of me. And I thought that maybe this is because I put on weight, maybe it's because I colored my hair, because I moved out. I just couldn't understand what it was I was missing, because I lost weight. Then I had lost all of my confidence. But when I started posting on Instagram and I started creating content, I could kind of get that confidence back as well. But some element was always missing in my life. And one day I went to church. I decided, okay, let's just go to church, because I stopped going to church for 4 years. I was like, it's not going to make sense. I'm not going to pray. And when I went to church, that's when I realized that God was what was missing in my life. The part of me that I felt died, that made me feel like I was just alone and not alive, was the part where God was missing in my life. And then I started going to church, not that often. I was still apprehensive, or I still doubted everything that was mentioned in the Bible. But the thing that I did was, instead of questioning it, I just started mocking stuff. If someone talks about God, I would be like, I don't think that's real. I don't think Jesus is real. I don't think that, like, why would that make sense? So I was like these cowards who would sit in a corner and just bitch about things without having the courage to directly ask this person, why is this happening? Until last year in August, I was sitting in church and there was this Arab priest in our church. So I go to this church in Sharjah called the St. Michael's Church. And he said he was reading the passage about the part where Jesus, after he died and then he rose up after 3 days, he came to show himself to the disciples. And when he did that, St. Thomas was not there. His disciple Thomas was not there. And when Jesus appeared to them and he left, all the other disciples told Thomas, hey, guess what? Jesus actually appeared in front of us. He spoke to us. St. Thomas said, I don't believe that. Until I put my fingers and touch his wounds, I'm not going to believe that he actually came. And then the priest said that there's nothing, this is what is most important about Thomas. The fact that he had the courage to ask questions. Because it's easy for someone to just be born into a religion or born into certain things and say, this is what I believe, and then not question it, right? But the fact that he questioned it, and then Jesus appeared in front of him, and then he did touch the wounds, and then he believed it, that speaks volumes about Thomas. And that's what we should be doing too. And at that instance in church, I sat down and I realized what I had been doing was wrong. And I sat there and I was really scared to ask God, to tell God to prove himself to me, because I have never done this. I'm raised in this conservative family where I wouldn't, if my father says you're not supposed to go out on a weekend, we just obey. There's no way I'm going to question that. If my dad says you're supposed to go and get married to this guy, we just obey. I would never ask my dad a question or my mom questions back, because this is wrong. We are not supposed to be questioning. So for someone like that, raised in that kind of a culture, for me to question God and say, God, prove yourself to me, was extremely scary. But I sat there and I just prayed and I said, God, I gathered all of my courage and said, God, I don't trust you exist. There's so many things that I don't believe in. Can you please prove it to me? And I just sat and I cried. And it felt like this big relief at the same time, too. And that is when everything started. From then on, it was like, a video would pop up, a Netflix show would pop up. Someone sent me a Quran. It started like this. A girl from my Instagram account sent the Quran to me. She posted, she's like, I want to send it to you. So she sent it. And I started reading the Quran. And then I realized that the stories mentioned in the Quran is the same as the stories mentioned in the Bible. So that opened my mind. It was like, oh, what? How, if another religion is talking about the same stories mentioned in my religion, then there must be some truth to my religion. Then I realized that the Torah also talks about the same stories. That means that the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians are all talking about the same stories. If they are all talking about the same stories and all talking about it, then that means we're all probably praying to the same God. So then I started digging a little bit deeper into all of these books and I started reading about it. And then I started getting exposed to these podcasts. The first one that I listened to was Matthias De Stefano, his show on Aubrey Marcus podcast, where he started talking about reincarnation. And I never believed in reincarnation. I thought these were just stories. But when he spoke about reincarnation, for the first time, it resonated with me. Till then, we never even have a conversation of reincarnation or the fact that we would come back again. But when he said that, it felt like the truth. This is what is real. Then I started hearing about past life regressions and I started reading books about it. I started looking up on YouTube about past life regressions. And there were people who were in deep states of hypnosis, remembering their past lives. And what made it so real to me was when they were, if you're dreaming about something and if it didn't resonate with your truth, you won't get so emotional about it. But these people going under hypnosis, they were shaking, remembering what happened in their past life. The emotions felt so real. That means that they were actually remembering something that was in the core, like something that they deeply remember. So I started reading about past lives and I started looking up into dimensions. Then there was Alex Ferrari's podcast where he spoke about near-death experiences. And I started listening up about how people have a near-death experience and they meet people and then they come back and their lives change. Betty, your story was also one like that, right? You had a near-death experience and you came back and your life just completely turned around. And these things kept happening. And the way people talk about it, it's like they were not dreaming. They knew that this happened and this is real. So from then on, I started listening to a lot of channelers. I started listening to it. Initially, I didn't understand what this meant, but then I started differentiating between the human talking and the channeled message that was coming. And I started listening to a lot of it. And then it got to a point where I was like, I want to channel too. I want to be able to channel. This feels amazing. Especially at the time, AI also came out. So when AI came about, logically, I started understanding that what AI does is just consolidating all of the data and then bringing the data out that is most relevant to you. So then that made it realize, then I realized that that means, okay, it's not such a big deal to what we are doing as well as human beings too. We have all of this information in our head, and when someone asks a question, we are just basically taking it out of the information that's in our head. So when we are going into these hypnosis or deep past life regressions, etc., we are just picking information out of it. And when Matthias said that our cells in our body holds information from all of the lives that we have lived, everything on the planet, it started making more and more sense to me. And I started practicing channeling. And what I started doing was how it works is bought a course from Lee Harris. He channels disease, and he has a course which talks about how you can start channeling. So I wake up in the morning and I do a sort of meditation, and I just play the music that is there as part of the course, which has got angel tuning for. So it starts with an angel frequency, and then there is a music that's probably like an uplifting music. So listening to that music, I just start jotting down whatever comes to my head without any judgment, even if it means a blue turtle or a rubber ducky, whatever it is, you start writing it down. So I started doing it, and I kept doing it for 4 6 months, and it just nothing great happened out of it when I was writing it down. But then when I flipped through the pages last month, I started noticing that the way I write things now while channeling is so different from the way I used to write in my journal 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I would write stuff like, okay, you're not doing enough. You need to have $100,000 in your account. You need to apply for the next promotion. I was just being too hard on myself, right? You have to do this. You're not working out. Okay, you've put on weight. You've got to lose weight. But then when I started reading up the messages that I was writing in the last few months, it was like this. I'm asking, what do I have to do? And I'm writing down, you're doing enough already. There's nothing more you need to do. I love you. You are loved. You're already doing enough. Just live life. And then I keep asking, okay, should I quit my job and should I do full-time podcast or something? And I would write down things like, you do not have to quit anything. You can just do everything as much as you want. Take breaks, do it. There's no, it's like the usual me there would be a right or a wrong. There's no in between. But when I started doing the automatic writing, and when I ask questions and I write down my own answers, the answers were different. It was more compassionate, more loving. And I started getting into the state of mind where I was being a lot more loving to myself. I'm someone who I will not accept it if I make a mistake. I'm very harsh on myself. If I make a mistake, if I do an error, I get really pissed off with me. And because I do that, when someone else makes a mistake, when they do something stupid, I get really angry at them too. I don't have the compassion towards the other people. And when I started becoming more loving, I started attracting more loving people into my life. And then during September, October, when the war started off between Palestine and Israel, and that's the first time I started seeing people in a war zone country talk on Instagram. Until then, we watch people talk about it, but then it's like they don't speak English and they look different from how I look or the people that I know. So I couldn't resonate with them. But when I watched these kids, they looked exactly like the kids that I grew up with. They looked exactly like my friends. They speak English. And when they were crying and saying, I have got exams to attend, and we have no food to eat. We look at them, look at what they're doing. Nobody's helping us. So when I watched that, I could feel like they were my own brothers and sisters, like my own children. And seeing them go through so much, and when I know that the leaders in the world have all the capabilities to stop this war and they were not doing it, I felt so helpless and I felt so angry. And I made a prayer at that point of time saying, God, I want to do whatever I can for this world. Please use me as an instrument to do your work. And that's like the prayer that I kept saying, that I want to do something. God, help me do whatever I need to do. And in Feb, while channeling, I started writing down, start a podcast. I'm like, why? Because I was happy with just doing food blogging on Instagram. But I started writing, it just kept writing. I was like this sort of urgency where it's like, start a podcast, talk about it. And then I was like, okay, but how? I mean, I'm not awakened, as in I don't have a Kundalini awakening or a near-death experience, nor do I know, nor do I channel. Who's going to come on my show? I don't have any guests. I don't know anybody for that matter. Like, why would anyone even? I don't even have the right kind of podcast. I don't have enough subscribers or anything like that. The stuff that I post about is fashion or lifestyle related. But I just listened to what the message that I got, and I took it as a sign, and I decided I'll start a podcast. And I decided that 4th April 2024, which is 4 2024, like a angel number, I decided to start it. And in March, I started approaching people to come on my podcast. And I was so surprised when I message people, they would say yes to me. I'm like, why would you say yes to me? They won't even ask me to show my YouTube channel or my podcast channel or Spotify. They won't even ask me for, I was expecting them to ask me to convince them, to show them my analytics or show them something. I had nothing. And they would say yes to me. Like Betty said yes to me. Marina Jacobi said yes to me. I'm like a huge fan of all of these people. And they just started saying yes to me. I'm like, what? And I started speaking to them. The first time I spoke to Betty, like Betty, you were like the first person on my show, right? You were like the first person I spoke to. Oh, I lost my cool. I was like fangirling over Betty. And after the interview, I was like, oh, I could have just mellowed it down. I could have controlled my emotions a little bit. And I spoke to Betty. And then the next time it was Marina Jacobi. And then it was Hadil. So it just started getting better and better. And God started answering my prayers or answering my questions through these guests. I started learning so much more about God's wonders through them. And I started speaking to this girl named Hadil, who would also speak to God, who can hear God, who can listen to Jesus. And I keep asking questions. And at one point, I was speaking to Hadil, and there was this question that I really was dying to ask, which is, I actually didn't believe that Jesus died or that Jesus was crucified. Because in the Quran, it says that Jesus was not crucified. It was Barnabas who was crucified. And that's what all the Muslims believe. So I wanted to ask it, but I was really afraid to ask. And Hadil just said, oh, wait, I'm getting a channeled message. And she's telling me, Jesus talking to me saying, child, fear not, ask the questions that's deeply bothering you. It's okay. And I just started crying because I wanted that. I wanted somebody to tell me that it is okay to ask questions. I have been raised in a manner where asking questions, especially as a girl from an Indian community, born in a Muslim community, it's so difficult for me to ask questions. But when Jesus told me that it's okay, ask your questions, then I started asking Jesus all the questions. Hey, Jesus, weren't you afraid to die? Jesus, did you actually get crucified? Then it was like, I just started getting really cool with Jesus, and it's like that. So Jesus and God and archangels, they want us to ask questions. They're not going to come and say, you have to stop doing this. They want us to ask questions. They want us to seek them. And they enjoy doing that. When Hadil was talking about how she can always hear God, for some reason, I felt like God would probably not want to talk to me. So I never asked her to channel a message from God to me. I felt like maybe I was not worthy enough. I had all of these thoughts in my head until day before yesterday. I told her, can you please ask God can you channel a personal message for me, God? And then God channels a message to me saying, seek me. I mean, I want to. So God said, I want to connect with you. Seek me and you will find me. And I'm like, what? That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I wanted God to invite me. And I was like, oh my God, God said he wanted to connect with me. And then it's like, okay, seek you, right? Okay, I'm going to seek you. Fine. What should I do? So it's like, then the questions flipped around and it's like, what should I do, God? What should I do? What should I do? How can I speak to you? How can I listen to you? How can I hear you? And it's like this. Then, again, these, like a YouTube video would pop up. Another person would send me a message. A new guest would say something that I would bring up on the show. They would open my mind to something new. I would read a book. And it's just been such a fascinating journey since then. And I've realized that what we are supposed to be doing in this life is to ask questions. And every time you ask questions, God answers it. Treat God and treat the archangels, treat Jesus like our own friends, and they are more than happy to be with you and answer anything that you have. We are not alone. And that's the first thing. We keep thinking that we are so alone. We cannot trust someone around us. We can't speak to strangers. We cannot allow our children to speak to strangers. We are just so afraid of anyone else who doesn't look like us, who live in some other country, who don't speak like us, who don't dress like us. But the truth is, all of us are same. And it's just made me so much more open to things. It's gotten me so excited about living life and knowing this. And there's also this new show that came out, which is about Moses, the Testament story of Moses on Netflix. So while watching it, I've jotted down some 50 questions, and I'm like, God, these are my questions, and I want these answered. So I'm excited to see how God's going to send those answers to me. And that is my story, Betty.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to get to know you more. And I really loved the quest that your journey is. It's a quest for knowledge, it's a quest for truth, and it's a quest for connection. That's what I got out of, like going on this little journey with you. Some of the stuff that I wrote down, you said, God is what was missing in my life. That's what made me feel alone. And I totally identify with that God-sized hole that I can try to fill with so many other things, with people, with distraction, with food, with drugs, with whatever it is that I think is going to make me feel fulfilled. But it really is that connection to God. I think that that's so beautiful. And another thing that you said that came up for me while you were talking was the ego's voice versus spirit's voice, and how absolutely different those two voices are. How one is just totally condemnation and so mean, and the other can be so uplifting and amazing. And I want to thank you so much, because that was super comprehensive. And I know that we were talking beforehand and you were like a little concerned about being able to share a story, but you got a story, sister. All right.
Yeah. I was also surprised I had something come. I'm like, okay, what am I going to say? But okay, that's good. That was just, thank you,
Yeah,
God.
thank you, Spirit. Thank you,
Yeah,
Spirit.
thank you.
I want to see if maybe we can talk a little bit about your revelations around starseed, light worker, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, okay, that was crazy, right? So what happened was so it started off with this. There was somebody, so I was looking for guests on Instagram, and I happened to come across this girl write on a comment saying, hey, I speak to the ETs. You know what? I speak to the ETs. I'm like, hey, this girl sounds interesting. Let me go message her. So I DM'd her, and that girl happened to be Hadil. And I messaged her saying, hey, listen, I have a podcast. And she doesn't speak so much about any of this on her Instagram account, nor does she have a lot of followers. But I just went with my intuition and I messaged her. And she messaged me back saying that, yeah, sure, that would be amazing. You're in Andromeda. I'm like, hey, Andromeda, what is that? I'm like, what is that Andromeda? She said, and then I started looking up about it. And what happened was I started researching about Andromedas. And by the way, I told my mom as well and my family that, hey, guess what? I'm an Andromeda starseed. And now my sisters call me a starfish. They call me an android. So it's like, oh, here comes the starfish or the android. I'm like, oh, you girls, you ancient souls. So, so, um, I researched about it, and what happened was there was this guy who was talking about how he remembers, how he astral traveled to the Andromeda galaxy. So Andromeda is like another galaxy, and star seeds are basically souls who came from other galaxies who reincarnated on the planet Earth to help us ascend, to help with the evolution, to help with balancing out the energies. Because on the planet, what happened was, if you've read the Dolores Cannon's book, there were three waves of volunteers that came up. So one of them, or the three waves of the volunteers, were the people who came from the other galaxies. So they had sent out a call. I don't know if your audience can handle all of this, but I'm just going to go ahead and speak about it. Okay. So the Galactic Federation had sent out a call for help saying that Earth needs help. And this happened because we did the atomic bombs. So when that happened, they were like, okay, the kids on the planet Earth, they're going crazy. If we don't stop them right now, they're going to blow up this whole universe. So let's go and help them out. And there were a couple of souls from the other planets, like the Pleiadians, the Lyrans, the Syrians. I don't know the whole of them, but they volunteered to come here and reincarnate. And apparently, I am also one of them. And when I watched this guy talk about how he astral traveled to the Andromeda galaxy, and what he saw were monks, people like the Buddhists who were very Zen like, and they would meditate and they would do these superhuman things. And in their planet, manifestation happens instantly. So when you think about something, it instantly happens. And when he said that they were monks and they would meditate, that's when I was like, oh my God, because I have always felt like I miss home. I felt like there's always this part where I miss home. And when I think about home in my meditations, it's always about this place like that looks like a temple where I'm sitting and meditating. And I kept feeling sad that I'm not able to get there. And I started buying books or reading books on Taoism, on Buddhism, and the kind of messages that comes through it. And I always feel like, oh, I wish I could go there. I wish I could go to these other temples and meditate. But I have a child, I have job, I have bills to pay. So it just feels like this meditation and doing all of these spirituality things feels like a luxury these days. Till I started reading the book on Taoism, and I realized that you don't have to go anywhere else. The peace and the calm that you look for is within you. And that's when I started to create my own space in my room where I can sit and meditate. For the first time, I also went for a spirituality retreat recently. And I thought maybe let's just check it out. But nothing related to spirituality happened there. And I feel like this in the spirituality world as well, a lot of us think that, okay, if I buy this next crystal, if I buy these all the chakra crystals, if I eat vegan and I spend money buying organic food, or I go and do another uh, hypnotherapy, another session, another akashic reading, we keep spending money doing this, and you don't have to do any of that. You can just sit in your room and meditate, and the answers will just keep coming up to you. And that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind as well. You cannot fast track spirituality and awakening, and you don't even have to do that. It will just happen at its own time and its own space. Another thing was, while reading the book on Buddhism, there was actually a part where uh, Siddhartha Gautama says, or the part where they say that in Buddhism, Buddha left his family. Apparently, they say that Buddha left his wife and his son, and then he went to do spirituality, like meditation and all. And that's where I lost the story with Buddhism. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why is it so hard to meditate and do the things that you want to do when you have your wife and child? Why do you have to leave them? And I asked this question to Hadil, and Hadil channeled the answer. And Hadil's like, okay, I can see Buddha right now. And he's saying that he never left his wife and child. His wife and child left him. Because what happened was, he was from a king's, he was a prince, right? He came from this, the palace. When he started getting into these things, his wife and child started getting threatened. Their safety started getting difficult. And so they were the ones. So he made sure that he had to actually, they left him so that they could be safe. And he was telling them that I ensured to put them on top of a mountain where they spend the rest of their life. And all the food and all the prosperity that they required was already kept with them as well, so that they could live life smoothly. And that made most sense to us. Even there's a part where they say that I watched another episode on Alex Ferrari's podcast where there was this lady named Wendy who speaks about how Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married. And at first, when I heard that, I was like, that is BS. There's no way that's going to happen. Why would Jesus do that? And then I started asking myself, why would I think that way? Right? What's wrong in being married? What's wrong in being with a woman? Why do we think that women are this big red flag that we cannot attain our goals if we are with the women? Why? If you watch the story with Moses, Moses is with his wife and children. And that is just as holy as meditating, right? Having your own wife, raising children, leading them, being a good father, being a good husband. This is not easy. This is just as important. So, knowing all of this, my mind started opening up, and I started realizing that the more and more it's not about this one person solely attaining this sort of spirituality thing. It's more like it's a harmonious balance. You do your duties on the planet, having your family, you have your wife and your children, and then you also pursue spirituality. It goes hand in hand. You do everything that is earthly by seeking the help of God. And even in Jesus, right? Jesus had Joseph died when Jesus was 15 years old, and Jesus had to do all the earthly responsibilities of taking care of his mom and his siblings. Then he had wife and he had children. And in his pursuit as well, Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary together helped him when he needed help. So when Jesus was doing the healing work, and this is channeled by Wendy. So when he was doing the healing work, it was Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene helping keep the crowd in check. So it's like both the divine masculine and the divine feminine, they have to come together. And it's a job that all of us have to do. The earth has a lot of healing to do. The divine feminine energy has a lot of healing to do so that we can all come together. And it's not just the females, right? There's the intuition and the feminine energy, even in the men that have been suppressed. And when we come together and heal the planet, all the natural disasters we see, all of these calamities we see, all of that is going to subside. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as well.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. Before we started recording, we were kind of talking about logic, right? Like I come from a very logical, analytical space.
Yeah.
And of course, that is the divine masculine, the logic, the reason. And then the feminine is about the intuition. And I really do believe that every living conscious being is here to integrate those two energies. How do we find the balance between being very logical and also dialing into our spirituality? So I love that you just mentioned that. And thank you again for sharing your journey. So I kind of want to shift gears because you sort of mentioned it a little bit, like your family sort of poking fun at you, kind of. And, I'm always very interested to hear about what is the familial relationship like once we come into this new awareness. And once we're a little bit more open-minded and maybe people that are directly surrounding us aren't. So what has your journey been like with sort of opening up and having your family sort of stay as they are?
Mm-mm. Right. Let's say they can't really understand if I'm joking, first of all. They don't understand if I'm joking and if I'm serious. That is the first thing. Even in my Instagram, yesterday I posted about how the earth is actually flat and not exactly round. I don't know. We'll find out if it's flat or round, right? So when I posted that, I got a message from one of my followers asking, I can't understand if you're joking or if you're being real. So it's like that because I say all of these serious things in a joking manner, because I laugh about it, because I take it like, big deal, what, earth is round, earth is flat. So they don't understand, I don't take it as, for me, when I'm speaking about things, I am doing it because I want to know. I'm doing it because I'm curious. For me, it doesn't matter if someone else accepts what I say or not. And in fact, in the beginning, I tried to convince people, right? I tried to be logical about it. I tried to say, this is what it is. But it just never worked. What happened in the process, though, is the more I started diving into it and the more I started knowing more and more about it, my fears started reducing a lot. As a single mom, I was trying to do so much. I was so fearful. I wanted to, um, like, I wouldn't spend this extra money. I was always fearful. What if I lose my job? Oh my God, I cannot lose my job. What if I post on Instagram and my colleagues see it? What's going to happen? I'm not going to do that. But all of that just went away. And it's like my fear is reduced a lot. It doesn't matter to me anymore what someone else thinks. It doesn't matter to me if I have a job, if I don't have a job, if I have 100,000 in my account, if I don't have it. Do I have clothes to wear today? Do I have food to eat today? Do I have a roof over my head today? Is my family safe today? That's it. In this way, God is going to keep all of us safe forever. And He's promised us that. That's all that matters to me. All that matters to me is to make sure that I am following the light. Because I have noticed while I started interviewing people for the podcast, that even people with spiritual gifts, even people who can channel or read the Akashic records, there is a high tendency for them to stray. when fame or popularity comes, when money comes, there are chances that they could stray the path and they might stop seeing the light. And I started noticing this more and more. And that is what scares me more. For me, it doesn't scare me if I lose, if my parents stop talking to me, or if my friends stop talking to me. It does not matter to me anymore. What matters to me is to make sure that pride or ego doesn't get in the way. In the story of Moses too, Moses had God speaking to Moses, right? But then he had anger issues, and then you can see that he never got to the promised land. He and his people, it was something that's supposed to take only 10 days, but they were still in the desert for 40 years and they never got to the place. And that's because Moses lost sight of the light. I guess he started becoming a tyrant like the rest of, like the pharaoh that he came out of, like the Egyptian kings. And that is what fears me. That's what scares me the most. When people of my colleagues see stuff on Instagram, the podcast, I'm still working, by the way. So the fact that I'm doing a podcast, I could stop doing all of this. I could just say, oh, I'm going to lose my job. I will never get to, I could stop doing the podcast. No, I don't care now. Now I know that seeking the truth is what matters, and that God is going to protect you, God's going to support you, and that's all right. And God does things in miraculous ways. All the things, there's nothing. I mean, we speak about all of these dimensions, right? We say that we've got the andromedans at this dimension, then we have got them at the other dimension. So we've got all of these dimensions, and guess who is at the top of all of these dimensions? It's God. God and the archangels can see everything from a completely different perspective, something that we cannot see. So there's no point. And this doesn't mean that you can't question God as well. There's always a choice. Even if someone says that, okay, if you seek this path, or even if you channel a message and says that this is, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, it doesn't mean that you have to do it. At the end of the day, God wants you to take power in your hands, make your own choice. If if you get a sign and it doesn't make sense to you, you can question that and ask God to show the path to you. So for me, that's what matters the most now. And what's more interesting, Betty, is I'm surprised that in the Middle East, people are awakening. I didn't know anybody could channel in the Middle East. My colleague said he could channel. I'm like, what? How's that possible? Then other people have started messaging me saying, hey, I know someone who does a channeled healing. Well, I'm just surprised. I thought all of this just happened in the USA. And this is one of the reasons why I started the podcast too. I wanted to know, is this whole phenomena happening only in the US or the Canada, or why isn't this happening in the Middle East? And it's happening. It's like the whole world is waking up, and it's fascinating and it's beautiful. And the ride, like you said, it's the great awakening. It's exciting.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I was blown away when you told me that you were from Dubai. I was like, oh my God, chicks from Dubai are into this stuff. That's incredible, right? Like, let's connect. So, and I have a very dear friend, and she is a Muslim near-death experiencer, which also is very rare. And when I ask, people of color, like, why do you feel like this is such a predominantly like white centered phenomenon? How come I never see anybody who looks different in this realm? And what I hear every single time is that culturally it's not accepted. So like, you might not
Yeah.
hear from Muslim experiencers, but there are Muslim experiencers, but their faith is very strict and rigid. And if a person was to come out and say, I hear the voice of God, it could be considered
Mm,
some kind of blasphemy, and they could be, excommunicated from their community. So thank you for bringing that up. And what kind
yeah.
of feeling do you have around that?
You know what? There in the Quran too, right? The thing that it's true. It's actually scary for me to talk about it. Even on my podcast, I would not, I can question all the things in the Bible, but I would think twice before I question something in the Quran. Because I try to speak about it with my friends over here. About my friends are all Muslims. So I try to speak about it, and I just couldn't get past a certain stage. It's like there's a block. If I say that, if I question something in the Quran, because what they say, what the Muslims believe, is that the Quran is the final word, it's the final book, it's the updated book. My first question always was, how can it be an updated book? What does it mean? An updated version means that God, as if God didn't know what was happening, what he was writing in the first book in the Torah. And then God got better in the second book, the Bible. And then finally, God got the whole thing together in the Quran. How does that make sense? Right? So I wanted to question that and find out as well. And the more I try to seek it too, there are things that I want to question in the Quran. But in the Quran, what happens is the Muslims believe that nothing in the Quran is manipulated. So the way they reason this is that they say that if you read, it's written in Arabic, which is the language that it was written in from the beginning, and if you read it, the tones that come out of it, the if you take a sum of the alphabets in numerical form, the sum of the numbers are going to be the same in the every page. So it's like they have, in a way, made it all the more difficult to question things in the Quran. And that is very difficult. And what they do is that they say, okay, this is how Prophet Muhammad lived, and this is how we have to live. We cannot question it. The fact that Prophet Muhammad had all the wives, and because of that, the people say that the Muslims can have 4 wives. To me, that doesn't make sense. How is that even possible? But we can't question it here. I cannot question that. Because Betty, you are posting this in the US, I can ask all of these questions. It doesn't matter, right? But the fact that you can say that you can have 4 wives, how does that make sense? Does it mean that Prophet Muhammad may not have been channeling the right entity? Because I've started to realize that you can channel from low vibration to high vibration. And even the low vibrational entities that you channel have gifts. They have abilities to do things. And it's scary because they're really clever. I once asked a question to this guy who says he was channeling. And I asked him, why do you think darkness infiltrated the earth? And his answer was that there is no darkness, that we can just pick the timelines that we want. And then I realized that this guy was actually channeling a lower vibrational entity. Because the truth is, there is darkness. There are low vibrational entities, and we need to know how to, and we need to ensure that we are channeling the right entity all the time. And that requires prayer, that requires meditation, that requires seeking God in every aspect, that requires you to not be attached to money or fame or anger and all of those things. And here too, there is an influencer who spoke about how she's awakened. Okay, she spoke about how she got visions. And if you read her story, if you read her Instagram caption, she says that she is a starseed, but she cannot talk about it here. Not a lot of people are going to speak about it here. I don't think it's even allowed to question something that is in the Quran. It's not allowed. We will probably get punished for it, or the people will get really, really triggered by questioning what is in the Quran because they believe that this is the final word. There is no way you can question it. So in a way, they have ensured that there's no way we can question the Quran. There's also a phrase where they say that towards the end of the year, end of the world, the demons are people who are going to have the third eye, right? And when we say that when you're awakened, when someone gets a Kundalini awakening and all of these awakenings, your third eye opens up and you start seeing visions. So when they say that this is what's going to happen, they've already made people who are awakened to be dangerous. So why would they do that, right? Why would you put these things? Because the first thing that Jesus talks about is how you've got to ask questions. So if anytime someone says you cannot ask questions, you've got to believe whatever I say, that is a red flag. There's something wrong with this person. And anybody who tries to instill fear in you, saying that if you don't do this, then you're going to be in hell. And that's also one of the biggest things, right? I think in all of the religions where they say that there is hell, you're going to rot in hell. So for you to say that, that's it, there is hell, and then you're just going to wait in this dark, fiery place till God comes and talks about it, you've got to question it. So ask questions. This is what I keep telling even my daughter or anyone in the Bible too. When someone questions me about the questions that I ask or about the information that I ask, I tell them, ask the questions. Just put your question out to the universe and watch the miracles happen. Watch God sending the answers to you.
Wow. Thank you so much. I've loved having this conversation with you today. Thank you again for your willingness to serve our community. And I just want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
Oh, I'm actually genuinely excited that I got to speak to you. And it's amazing to just have a conversation, right? To be on the other end, to have a chat. I just felt like I was speaking to you. When I'm the one who's interviewing, I just think about, okay, have I asked enough questions? I'm always thinking about the audience. Have I had enough questions? Did the audience get enough? But to be here, Betty, and to speak to you and to your audience, I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for this space. And what do I say? I just want to say that we are going through this amazing time, and there's apparently 800,000 star seeds on the planet who needs to awaken. I'm not sure, Betty, if you're a star seed or not, but oh, obviously you have awakened, right? You're a star seed too. Okay, great, amazing, high five. So all of these star seeds have to awaken, and then we've got missions to do, we've got jobs to do, we have this new grid to awaken and do things. So let's just keep questioning. So if you resonate with any of this, don't fear what anybody else thinks. Go ahead and pursue, or like, get curious, find the answers to the questions that you have, ask more questions, and God is going to support you. You're going to have amazing people, like the people that you initially dealt with, they're all probably going to fall out, but don't worry. The kind of amazing people that are going to come into your life are just amazing. Like, look at this. I have someone like so cool, like Betty speaking to me. I've got all of these other people that I'm speaking to are just so unconditionally loving. I have no doubt that they care, and they just want the best in you. And that's the new earth that we're talking about. And I'm so excited for this new earth. And if you want to connect with me, feel free to get in touch with me. Although I'm not really sure what you can get in touch with me for. Oh, you can watch my listen to my podcast. I get amazing guests on my podcast. And I want more questions. If you've got amazing questions, please feel free to ask me, and let's ask it to all of our guests as well. And thank you so much, Betty. You're awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. All your links will be in the liner notes of this episode so people can connect with you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.